Hi all, welcome to the Paal15 Podcast. Today we have a very special episode with a good friend and guest on the show, I would say, Sam Restifo. Hi Sam, welcome.
Hey Jesse, how are you?
Yeah, we're going to talk a bit around partnerships today. You've been in the technology business for quite a while, I would say. You've started as a lowly administrator of technology in the office. Currently, worked all your way up to currently being a partnership manager for Asia Pacific and the Middle East, right? And in between, you've held various partnerships roles, right, at several companies. So yeah, you have a lot of experience, I would say, in this around partnerships.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, it's been 20 plus years now in industry. Kind of as you mentioned, kind of started out in the IT admin, IT ops world, running data centers and kind of ripping and replacing hard drives in people's garages, through to what is today kind of spearheading our kind of strategic partner business at Wipro across Asia Pacific, Middle East, and Africa.
Yeah, so keen to hear from your perspective around a couple of key elements that we are interested in at Paal15 around partnering. And I think it's good to start, right? Why partner? Why is partnering so important for you guys? Because of course, right, you cannot do this alone, or you cannot deliver technology on your own. You're always dependent on technology partners, but I guess there's a whole lot to it in terms of not only from a technology and vendor side, but also from other channel partners out there. So yeah, keen to get a bit of your perspective on that.
Yeah, look, I think for me, partnerships have always been really about scaling impact. No one company alone really kind of solves these big industry problems alone anymore, right? And so, whether it's in the world of sustainability, whether it's the new era of AI, digital transformation, these challenges are really quite complex. And so, if I look at the world of Wipro and then really even within my previous companies, partnerships were never really kind of just a nice to have. They were kind of essential to how we as a business stayed relevant to our customers and to our industries that we were serving, right? And so, if I fast forward through today, tech is moving so fast that kind of unless you're kind of continuously learning and evolving through these partnerships, you're going to be left behind. And so, for us here at Wipro in particular, the right partnerships helps us grow, helps us innovate faster, and it really kind of helps us stay focused on creating kind of real outcomes for our customers. And that's the end goal, creating something bigger than what we could have actually achieved alone, right? And so that's, for me, the kind of real power that partnerships and strategic partnerships in particular hold.
So is there any specific example of how of a successful partnership and how it benefited your organization or your customers, or how that, works in practice for you?
Yeah, I think when you kind of bring it to life, right, I think one of my favorite examples is actually at Water in New South Wales, or Water in SW. They themselves manage most of the water across New South Wales, and it's obviously a massive responsibility, right? It's a critical human resource. And so together with Microsoft, we had actually helped them build a real-time monitoring system leveraging Azure IoT and AI. And so the intention of that kind of coming together as a partnership really kind of gave them deep visibility into kind of dam safety, water levels, and water quality across the entire water network for New South Wales, right? And so for me, the thing is, none of that was about the underlying tech, right? It was Water New South Wales themselves, bought their operational and environmental expertise. We partnered with Microsoft around Azure and the Azure platform. And we at Wipro bought the kind of engineering muscle that kind of stitched that whole thing together, right? And to really kind of drive adoption and change right across the business. And so, the end result when you kind of see these partnerships coming together in a really successful fashion is, better water management decisions, improved safety, better outcomes for communities that rely on that critical resource. Something that fundamentally no one in that kind of partnership could have solved alone, right? It had to kind of be the formation of a critical partnership. And so that itself was kind of used as part of our kind of industry submission for the Microsoft Awards last year. We were awarded the Industry Partner of the Year here in Australia and New Zealand in partnership with Microsoft. So, really great case study of where you kind of see that whole thing come to fruition and to life.
Out of that experience, are there any sort of specific elements or essential elements then that you see, that you understand that, okay, oh, that makes it a great partnership? Is that the mixture of things, or is that the way you work together, or is that personal relationships, or what are those elements that make that happen?
Definitely a combination of many things, right? But I think when I look at partnerships, I kind of focus on three kind of core elements, right? First and foremost, there has to be a shared purpose. There has to be alignment on why we're doing this partnership in the first place. Are we solving the same customer problem, or are we just kind of chasing a revenue target? And that fundamentally kind of pivots the relationship as being either one that's built with intent to go and disrupt, or one that's just a transactional relationship. And so, upfront identification and having that shared purpose kind of keeps you focused. In particular, when things in the partnership start to go south or really going to get challenging. So that would be definitely first and foremost top of mind. I think second, there needs to be some complementary strengths. And so, if I use something dear to my heart, I'll use a soccer analogy, so to speak, or a football analogy if you call it the right thing. You don't build a winning team with 11 strikers on the field, right? You need defenders, you need midfielders, you need a great keeper. And yes, ultimately you need these goal scorers. But a partnership really should work fundamentally the same way. Each player brings a different role that the other subsequently can't fill to the same level of expertise. And so, I definitely kind of see that complementary strength being critical. And I guess the third element to me is one that's often overlooked, which is really around that kind of cultural alignment. It's just as critical as the first two. But can the teams fundamentally work together? Can we actually partner? Can we work at the same pace? Do we have the same values? Is there transparency and agility in how we're working together? And so, without that, you kind of spend a lot more time managing the misalignment than actually focusing on creating value for both organizations. So I think those three things are really kind of at its core what I'd look for in kind of potential partnerships that we look to formulate.
Are there any examples or experiences that you've had where that misalignment occurred, where you said, okay, well, one of these things, is a mismatch, and how can you sort of, avoid those mistakes?
One that I guess really kind of surprised me was a partnership with a global ERP company, actually. At first, it seemed relatively straightforward and a straightforward play. They had a great platform. We had a strong set of services to complement that platform and really just go about implementing it, right? And so it was really kind of that resale type relationship or partnership, I should say. And I guess what we didn't expect kind of came through the learnings that we took through joint customer conversations, where customers weren't just looking at the platform purely through an ERP or a technology lens around ERP anymore, and they wanted something that was a lot more industry specific, embedded things like AI, analytics, and kind of automation all built into one thing. And so, that insight coming back from the customer and the voice of customer feedback that we're getting really kind of reshaped the approach that we took to the relationship, right? It wasn't just reselling or kind of implementation of a platform. It was kind of how we go about creating or co-creating industry solutions on cloud, right? Opened up entirely different conversations, new revenue streams, market opportunities. And I guess, some of the biggest value in partnerships isn't about what you build, right? It's what you learn, where the market's heading, how do you deliver kind of new experiences for customers and so on. So definitely kind of a highlight that was unexpected in terms of how we viewed that partnership to where it is today.
So if you want to avoid those types of things, would do those issues where you understand later, like, hey, this should actually be a different partnership than it is now. How would you go about sort of avoiding that or mitigating it or trying to fix those things?
I see two common mistakes all the time, right? I think firstly, companies treat partnerships like a procurement deal, right? They negotiate hard on the commercials up front. They sign the contract, they sit back and they're like, okay, it's done. I'm going to wait for the results now, right? But they haven't really built that human relationship that's aligned on those kind of shared outcomes or that shared vision that I was talking about earlier. And so the partnership kind of really, without that, it just stalls, right? And then second, kind of I see organizations when they start to silo partnerships within the partner management function, or they treat it as an alliance. They don't have the broader kind of cross-group collaboration in kind of building that partnership. So, sales teams aren't involved, delivery teams aren't involved, even marketing as a function, right? Not working directly with, businesses like yourselves on kind of really establishing a unique proposition, right? As to why, why does this partnership even matter in the first place? And so, the more that gets siloed off, there's less focus on what the partnership's ultimately trying to achieve. And that disconnect really starts to then come out in how you execute in market, or how you don't, I should say. And so, they're the two most common mistakes. I'd probably say, I could list 50, but I think the two most common ones would kind of, stem from those.
Yeah, it's almost like you're building an entire business, right? Instead of just a side activity. If you treat it like a side activity, then it will probably fail. But if you treat it like a business, it's going to be probably a bit more successful, I guess. Okay, cool. So what is the biggest learning in your 20-year experience from partnering? What is the single thing that you would, say that others that are working on partnering should know?
Most valuable lesson, honestly, I think it's to play the long game with your partnerships, right? It's, some of the partnerships I'm most proudest of didn't necessarily show results in the first 3 to 6 months of that partnership establishing, right? But over 2-3 years, we subsequently saw, joint transformations. We did business together. We created huge value for our mutual customers or industries that we're going after. And so, I think that long game has to be there from the outset, right? And I think secondly, there has to be honesty, transparency. Don't sugarcoat things when they're not working. And the partners that even today, to this day, that I trust most are the ones I can pick up the phone and just say, hey, we've got a challenge here. Let's work on solving it together. And so, that transparency builds trust much faster than anything else. In particular, like I said, where, we may have multiple partners servicing the same industry or same customer, being able to kind of articulate where we partner and where we don't. It's not, necessarily always an exclusive thing, right? And so that ultimately comes down to having that transparency and honesty and kind of working relationship as the kind of, biggest insights or biggest learnings that I could pass on to anyone looking to establish a partnership out in market.
Yeah, I think those would also be the top actionable tips, right? And tricks almost, where you would say, hey, don't sugarcoat it, be transparent with each other, and build the long game. Go in this for the long term.
If I could leave with kind of the kind of 3 kind of key takeaways, right? Start with the customer problem at its core, right? Don't partner for the sake of just partnering. And if you aren't really kind of solving something meaningful with the customer at the center, it's just going to be noise in an organization, right? It's just a transaction, and treat it as such, right? There's no point calling partnering if it's not that. Second, I would say, co-sell early and co-innovate quickly, right? Teams working together before the deal is actually shaped. Don't just form partnerships on the basis of an RFP response, right? It's often something that I say time and time again. Build something new if you have to, and really don't just rely on this common theme or common message. What have we got on the truck to sell with Microsoft or AWS or Salesforce today, right? Kind of really start thinking through not just pushing existing products, but how you're creating value and co-innovating with your partners faster. And the last one that I touched on right at the end, the previous question is kind of build those relationships or partnerships on a foundation of personal trust, not just commercial trust, right? Really get to know the people on the other side, have real conversations, celebrate wins together, but also navigate through those kind of challenging, tough moments with complete transparency, right? And that ultimately all those things come together to really kind of fuel lasting partnerships and partnerships that matter.
Well, thanks, Sam. Thanks for that. Thanks for those insights. And great to hear your experience on partnering today. Right, Sam. Thanks. Thanks a lot for joining. All the listeners, thanks for tuning in. If you have enjoyed this podcast episode, please don't hesitate to subscribe to our Spotify, our YouTube, our Apple Music podcast playlist. Thanks for tuning in, and see you next time.
Thanks so much, Jesse.